This is Jeff Spieler, Tech Agronomist with DeKalb and Asgrow Seed. Today for a 2-minute drill, we're going to talk a little bit about the drought monitor situation in South Dakota, and more specifically, southeast South Dakota. So looking at the current drought monitor map, that bullseye over Lincoln County there with D3 extreme drought, and a lot of area around that and surrounding counties with D2 severe drought. This is a situation that's kind of developed over 2020. In 2019 we had, record rainfall. We were probably 12 inches above average in our research site there at Chancellor, whereas in 2020 we were about 8 inches below average rainfall. So, that kind of progressed throughout the season. We had enough subsoil moisture to get a pretty decent crop in 2020. It's going to be a little different situation going into 2021 with, much below average subsoil moistures. So we don't do the sampling in southeast South Dakota, but right across the border, and kind of the same situation there in Sioux and O'Brien and Plymouth County. They do the fall subsoil moisture sampling, and these soils are going to be, typically around 11 inches of full subsoil moisture in that top 5 feet, whereas right now we're looking at 1.5 to 2.5 inches of subsoil moisture, which is very low. So there again, we're going to go into the spring, unless something changes, during the springtime, we're going to be have fairly dry conditions. We just need to take into some considerations for 21 because of this. From a nitrogen standpoint, if it does continue to stay dry, mineralization is going to occur at a much slower pace, right? So soil microbes are less active in dry soils, so that mineralization is going to occur much more slowly. From a crop protection standpoint, some things to take into consideration. If you're doing burn down applications in no-till, strip-till, we're going to want to do those as early as possible. Reduce that water uptake from winter annual weeds, get those killed early. And the same really goes for termination of cover crops. We're going to want to get those killed as timely as we can, but just make sure the temperatures are warm enough to get a good kill. You don't want to waste your time and money out there if the temperatures are too cold. Get those daytime temperatures up to 60 degrees and we should get a pretty good kill. From a tillage and planting standpoint, some of the things to take into consideration, no-till, strip-till, anything that leaves the maximum amount of residue on the surface this year is going to be beneficial, right? So when we do start catching rains, we want the maximum amount of residue on the surface to capture, and maximize the absorption or retention of that rainfall. So, those practices are going to be extremely important. Planting as soon as conditions are favorable is also going to help reduce our risks. So early on in the planting window, we typically have better soil moisture in that top 2 inches, whereas sometimes later in that window, is when things get more variable. We start to dry out a little bit, and we see that variability in that top 2 inches. That's typically what causes that uneven emergence, right? Especially with soybeans. So we want to really be as aggressive as we can with planting early. It's also something we don't typically recommend is to chase that moisture, right? So start planting deeper. Try to chase moisture. It really causes us typically more problems with emergence difficulties. So really, kind of stay in that corn target depth around 2 inches. Soybeans in that 1 to 1.5 inches. Sometimes we can go a little deeper, maybe 1 3/4 inches on soybeans, but really not too much deeper than that. From a population standpoint, really don't get too aggressive in changing that. Still focus on your soil types, your fertility, your yield targets. We could turn this around. We could get some timely rains. We don't know, so we don't want to leave ourselves short. But really focus on that soil type piece of it. Know which soils you want to be more aggressive with than others. From a hybrid and variety selection standpoint, we can do some things, on those soils that we know have the ability or possibility to have some drought stress on them, lower water holding capacity soils, focus on hybrids and varieties that have more drought stress tolerance. We do a good job of trying to inform growers, which hybrids and varieties work better in those scenarios. This is a quick list here. Some hybrids like DKC 5125 Rib or 5192 or 5554. These are products that are very drought tolerant, and are going to do the best in them lower water holding capacity soils if we do get tough. So, the same thing goes from the Asgrow lineup. So there again, we don't know what's going to happen. This can turn around, but we want to take into consideration some of these things that may help us along if we are a little bit short on moisture in 21. That's all we had today. Thanks.